All right, thank you. Now we're going to sustainable sourcing.
Oh, that's us.
Oh, yeah.
Were you going to go up?
No, we're going to wait for Dave. Let go.
All matters.
All right, my name's Jonathan. This is Chris here from Yahoo, and we were talking about sustainable sourcing with our fearless leader, Shelley. And we came up with a couple of questions that I think came out of the blog, and to summarize them were this. What is talent acquisition for sourcing? Number two, or not in any particular order, managing and influencing the buyers. Essentially the management and the company and the processes, how to sustain that within the company and to sell it to top management, and a going concern. So if you implement a outsourcing or if you implement a sourcing strategy within the company, the HR director leaves and you're the sourcer, they were your key buy-in. If they leave, do you leave too, or does the company retain the sourcing arm of the recruiting process? So that's what we talked about. We broke that down into our priorities of, one, the managing and the influencing buyers, the going concern, and the talent acquisition for sourcing. And we also went into a couple things in the toolbox and whatnot. And we have a great sourcer here from Yahoo who will actually go into the strategy and tactics of it.
You can, since there's so many Chris's here, you can also call me Murdoch. Like the A-Team. I just need to hold it. It's mine. I wrote some notes. When it comes down to determining how you want to set up your sourcing organization, you have to determine the goals of the organization. Is it just to track down, create lists, name gen, or is it to actually get the people on the phones to generate warm leads so that the recruiters can then get on the phones and try to close them? And that's the difference between being tactical or strategic. And then within that, it's a matter of being proactive or reactive. Do you want to set up a sourcing organization that's just going to go out and find the talent you'll need for the future, or do you want to set up an organization that is filling the needs that you have for searches now?
Here's your cue cards.
No, I think I'm okay.
Okay.
I think I've got it. But you also, when you set up a sourcing organization, you also need to make sure that if you're committed to them, you need to resource them properly. Giving them paid resources such as like Hoover's, OneSource, Capital IQ, or making sure that they hire sourcers that know where to go for the free stuff like LinkedIn and in some cases Jigsaw or other resources.
Yeah. I'll go on these parts here.
Yeah. Okay. And that kind of talks about essentially like our toolbox. We went into a couple of things in, essentially job boards, resume databases, and the LinkedIn's. And then we were talking about how to implement the strategy. A couple of things are, what is sourcing all about? And these are some of the questions, and I'll go into a little bit more detail. Getting funded from the management, what key metrics do you come up with to plead your case or to keep the going concern alive and well in the organization? And what is available in the toolbox? We've talked about that. What's the bottom line? Now, here's going into some of the key buy-offs, how to actually sell this to management or keep the process alive. Some of these things from CEO perspective or a VP of sales perspective. If you're sourcing for sales, essentially if you can prove, cost not to hire, and Mark gave a great example. If you can go and find the day in the life of that one recruit or candidate, and you can prove how much value they provide to the company on a daily basis, and project out what the cost of that person not being in the seat and actually doing their job, and you can quantify that against the workforce, that is a metric then that you can utilize to sell sourcing. Of course, it's similar to what your time to fill and cost per hire. It also could be, we're talking about here in metrics, which is one of the things we're trying to utilize for how do we actually sell sourcing. In metrics, if we're talking about cost per hire, the infamous cost per hire, the other side of that is, can you prove a decrease in cost per hire using sourcing? Another thing we talked about is the I think even on ERE there's a lot of debate going about this. How do you quantify the quality of hire? One of the examples that we were using was maybe it's not a quality of hire, but certainly in a sales role you can quantify how long does it take someone to get up to speed, and does that salesperson or whatever controller or whatnot, are they getting up to speed in that kind of time? So from a sourcing side, are you actually hiring people that are better, faster, and meeting those metrics? Then we talked about that's the ROI, so it all comes down to at the bottom end for the going concern and the managing, selling it to management, all comes down to the bottom end of the company, to the bottom line. How is the company or the people you need to sell to going to look at what does sourcing do for you? Some companies, they're going to call up Shally because they already know they want sourcing. They already have a product that they need to get to market, and they need salespeople out there to work on. Other side is they may not know that there's sourcing is even available or what it is or how it works, other than going into the Monster database and having an intern look up names that a recruiter can call. So that was one of the questions we were coming up with. One other thing that we were saying as far as the going concern is when you have a sourcing organization in the company, you need to sell your performance. So if you are actually placing people at a lower cost and a quicker time to fill, and their quality of hire is higher, you need to sell that to the hiring managers. So those hiring managers know what the source was, rather than just through a staffing firm. It did come through your sourcing rather than the standard recruiting model, because that will actually build sustainability for the project.
Anything else?
Okay, there's one more thing. There's only one more thing that was important to me, and that's the bottom point here, which is really difficult to read, but it has to do with going concern. So you're in an organization, they probably hired you to do the sourcing. Obviously, whoever hired you already bought into it, because that's why you're there. You're establishing a sourcing team, sourcing architecture, and then your boss leaves. And now you're all on your own. So to get over that, or in order for us not to get lost in the organization when our leadership changes, because inevitably at some point it will. Now we may leave before that, so that's a different question. But to answer that question, the two things that we came up with were to find business champions, that is, not in HR, but besides your leadership in HR, actually go out to the business and establish champions that believe in what you're doing and believe in the value of what you're doing, whether you have to prove it through any one of these other things like cost per hire or cost not to hire. Or the other one, or you could do both, is to establish relationships or cultivate relationships with the hiring managers that you're pleasing. So you're successful at your sourcing and you're getting the hires in, and the hiring managers are happy with your work. They can actually also be your champions, or they could be your champions, so that you don't have to worry about, if your leadership leaves, going back to the next person that comes in and saying, well, we have this sourcing team and we don't know if we're going to be able to keep it or not. Your managers are going to say, well, we want you to stay because we already saw the results that you can contribute. So to me, that was an important outcome of this, because I think a lot of people, especially when sourcing is such a new industry, it's such a new field, that you have people that get into the job, they learn it, and then all of a sudden their entire leadership changes, and they're kind of like, oh, what do I do now? And most of the time what happens is they go back to being a recruiter, and now they're back in a more traditional role. I think if we did this more often, we would survive. And that was the key to sustainable sourcing, in my opinion. Anyway, that was it.
Any questions?